Jesus, please bless us in this service today. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, you are in our midst. That doesn't mean you're not in our midst when there's nobody here. It just means it doesn't matter how little our group is.
Yes.
You are still with us, Jesus.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Bless those who cannot be here. Heal those who are sick. And minister to your people today. Holy Spirit, speak your words. Without you, it is nothing. In Jesus' name. Today we are, as you can tell from the verse, doing Following the Star. So today we will begin a journey. We're strapping on our sandals, we're blanketing our camels, and we're looking up. We feel the cold of the desert night, we hear the cries of the wild dogs, and we sway with the motion of the camel. And we are one of 3, following a star. And as everybody guessed, yes, today we're joining the wise men. It's Matthew 2:1, English Standard Version. Lately I've not been able to get any version to do what it's supposed to do but English Standard, so that's where we are. This one's King James Version, for whoever prefers. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men came from the east and came to Jerusalem. And now you say, Pastor, Christmas is over. Just because you still have your Christmas tree up does not mean you can preach Christmas sermons. But here's the thing. Yes, Christmas is over. But the wise men aren't there yet. The wise men were not there for Jesus' birth. They were not there for the manger scene. We put them in the Christmas story because to have them show up, now it is a split depending on who you talk to. Some say 2 years later, others say a few months later, somewhere in January, so where we are now. But it's still later, you know. It wouldn't work if we put them later on for the manger scenes or the pageants. Like, you can't put up a little sign that says, later in the story, you know. It doesn't work. And so here we are. We're a month or more ago, we as the wise men saw the star and we chose to follow it. And we're still following it. We've been following it for a while. We know it's not just any star. And we know it's worth the hardships. And there are hardships in the desert. You have bandits, you have thieves, you have people from other kingdoms who don't like you. It's not safe traveling in the desert. We, as the listeners of the story, so that's us, should think for a moment on who these men were. They are the Magi. Now you'll see Magi used as different terms for different things. They were kings from the east. Some say they were astronomers, others say they were priests, but we are pretty sure that even if they were those things as well, we're pretty sure they were definitely kings. Now in my manger scene, they cover every possible ethnic group that the wise men could be. One, we have an Asian king, or I guess he'd be an emperor. He doesn't have the hat though. It's a little bit of a letdown. If he's an emperor, he should have the hat. The other one we have is possibly Ethiopian, very, very, very dark-skinned man. The last one could be from anywhere. He's got, brown hair, white skin. He could be from Canada. But they're each a possible Eastern royalty, which is kind of interesting. But we don't actually know what these kings looked like. Some people like to believe they know exactly what country they came from. We don't actually know. Like, there's no physical solid thing that shows us where they came from. We just know that they were mentioned and they were there. But here's another point that no one speaks of, and the Bible actually doesn't mention it. If they were kings or of any kind of wealth, they would have had a procession. Now, does anybody remember the movie Aladdin?
Yes. kind of.
Okay, good. If you don't remember the movie and you remember the book, that's okay too. I like to talk about the Disney version, the cartoon, not the live action, because of course that was the only one that was really well done. There was an early one in the 70s or 80s, it was okay, but the best one was that Disney cartoon, and I digress. When Aladdin comes to Agrabah as a prince, how does he enter?
On a white horse throwing coins.
That's in the book, yes. In the movie, he comes with a massive procession. He comes with jugglers and dancers and acrobats and exotic birds and music and throwing gold coins in the streets to the people. That's how a king arrives. Kings would not be traveling without their people. Now, perhaps they didn't come with the full parade with the elephants and the flying carpets, but they would have had their servants and their guards and possibly even some envoys to send ahead of them. But we don't think of what that might have looked like. What it would have looked like to the people, or to Herod sitting up in his evil tower on his evil throne thinking evil thoughts. I often think of Herod kind of like Saruman from Lord of the Rings. See him sitting up there in his dark tower looking at his ball. Anyways, moving on. These men of great wealth were coming to worship and to honor a king that was not Herod. 3 lowly men with sweat and dirt from the desert wouldn't have been able to have gained audience with Herod, and they certainly wouldn't have concerned him. But like Jafar in Aladdin watching in anger as the procession of Aladdin rode through the palace gates, Herod would have watched the riches of 3 kingdoms come to him and then sat in horror as they said they were seeking the new king who was recently born. And yet it was all part of God's plan. God could have made it so they didn't go to Herod, but he let them, and we don't know why. Matthew 2:2-6 says, this is the wise men saying, where is he who has been born the King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. Now, saying all of Jerusalem with him probably doesn't mean all of Jerusalem, not, the Jewish people sitting there waiting for their Messiah to come. They probably wouldn't have cared at all if Herod had been taken off the throne. This would have been probably the people within the palace. So you would have had tons of people living within the grounds, and they all would have directly reacted however the king reacted, just to keep their positions in their heads. We know Herod had a bad temper. So when it says all of Jerusalem, is probably not meaning all of Jerusalem. Just putting that out there. And they told him, the scribes and we went there. They're telling Herod, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will be shepherd to my people Israel. And we move on one more we're going to do the next verse in a minute. Herod's gardens and courtyards and massive outdoor baths, also known as swimming pools, his riches, he had this massive palace with all this wealth, and it was all in jeopardy because of a new king who was a man of great love for the people, or was going to be and was prophesied to be. And a man of great wealth had come to worship him. And in truth, like I said before, I often wonder what the wise men were thinking, assuming that Herod would be okay with them coming and saying, oh, no, we're not here for you. Yeah, we're here for him. Like, clearly, there had never been any sort of like a coup or an uprising in their kingdoms, or they would have realized that the present dictator, known for his evil, wouldn't have been pleased to know that there had been a merciful king born into his kingdom. Matthew 2, 7-9. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen, when it rose, went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. I kind of wonder a little, like people want to go, okay, the Bethlehem star is this star, or it's that star. And they sort of like to pretend that you can actually still see it. Maybe you can, I don't know. I actually wonder if the star wasn't a specific star put there for a time that is no longer there, just for this purpose. I've heard people say, and you kind of wonder a little because of the way the star moves, if maybe the star was actually an angel guiding them. And this is hearsay. Admittedly, most of what we say about the wise men are hearsay. We don't have a lot of evidence. But it's interesting to kind of think of what it might have been and what God might have been doing. The wise men, like I said, they show up for a very short period of time, and then they're gone. It's like Melchizedek all over again. That you're there, and then they're gone, and you never hear about them again. What we do know is that they came, and we do know they followed the star, and we do know that they brought gifts. And then the rest of it we kind of play with. We pull from history and try and figure out what was going on. Matthew 2, 10-12 says, when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, I mean, it's interesting that it says, and going into the house. Makes you kind of wonder where they were staying at the time. They saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. So the wise men had come for a very important purpose. Partly they had come for symbolism. They had frankincense, which is used in religious and, now this is a quote I took, so I'm going to just read it. Used in religious and spiritual rituals for thousands of years, frankincense is a symbol of holiness and righteousness because it is so fragrant, when burned. It was used by ancient peoples as a religious offering. In Christianity, frankincense represents Christ's sacrifice. I took that quote from a thing called Sage's Ingredient Insight. So she teaches you like how to cook with this stuff, but likes to give you the history. Anyways, so we have our frankincense. We have our gold, which of course symbolizes holiness and divinity and royalty, showing Jesus as king. And they brought myrrh, this strong perfume. Remember, myrrh is mine, this bitter perfume. Used to symbolize Jesus' death. Myrrh was actually often used in pre-burial preparation. They think, and I'm just going to throw this out here and then I'm going to walk away from it because I don't like playing with this one thing too much. People like to believe in the Christ cloth. So they like to say that when Jesus rose, now of course his linens were still there, but they like to say that the cloth that covered his face had imprint of his face on it. And people like to believe it was burned in by his radiance. That's going a little far for me. However, if you speak to embalmers, and there are actual embalmers who have gone through the story and given their insight, they will tell you that the body in Jewish culture and customs is prepared with so many different oils to keep it kind of fresh and kind of from smelling, because people like to, go and pay their respects, that there probably was an imprint of the face because there would have been such heavy oils on the cloth. So say you went to bed and you like putting, what's an oil like we put on our faces at night? Like rosehip. You take a little rosehip oil, you put it on your face, it takes away wrinkles. If you get up in the morning, there's usually an imprint of that oil on your pillow. So it is possible that there was an imprint of his face on the cloth due to those oils. And of course, myrrh was one of those oils. It's a perfume, but it's an oil-based perfume. And now we step away from that and we don't mention it again because there's a lot of arguments over the cloth. For those actually wondering, the nard, let's go to nard, used on Jesus's feet prior to his betrayal. So we remember Mary poured the perfume on Jesus's feet, washing it with her hair. The nard was also symbolic of burial. However, nard and myrrh are not the same thing. In case people were wondering, they have this similar symbolism, but they're not the same oil. They're different types of perfume. The one is extracted from the nard plant. The other comes from the commiphora tree. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but I found that very interesting. Not to be confused with the camphor tree. Similar names, but they're different trees. And now we'll just step out of our little botany lesson. The three gifts were symbolic, of course, of Jesus' holiness as God and his kingship and his death that was coming. It has also been mentioned, however, that these gifts were very practical due to the fact that both the myrrh and the frankincense could have been sold for a fair amount of money. And of course, gold is gold. So, meaning that as the family fled from Herod into Egypt, actually they settled just outside of Egypt, if I'm not wrong, they would have had the money to pay for their transport to, bribe people to help them get out. You don't know a ton of that. We need almost more information sometimes. But they would have had the money to set up a new shop for Joseph. They would have had the money to buy a new house, to clothe the baby. Everybody knows the babies go through clothes like you wouldn't believe. The gifts were symbolic, yes, but they were also quite practical. And we're flipping pages. Like I said, my writing's tiny today. So we wonder what our three wise men were doing while watching the sky. Woo. There we go. And the fact that they were watching the sky is why people like to believe that they were astronomers. They're referred to as wise men or magi, which is why people like to think that they were priests and why people like to think that they were kings. But frankly, a king could also be a priest depending on the country. And he could, if he wished, choose to dabble in astronomy. Considering astronomy would be known to them back then. We like to think that all of the sciences are new, but they've been around since pre-Jesus's birth. Actually, we are condemned to have to study math because of ancient Arabians. In case anybody wants somebody to blame, they're who's to blame. A king wanting to look intelligent might mimic some of the works of his scientists, and he probably would have had scientists within his court. The first documented records of systemic astronomy, I can't talk today, astronomical observations date back to the Assyro-Babylonians around 1000 BC. From this cradle of civilization in Mesopotamia, in the southern part of present-day Iraq, astronomers have built up knowledge of the celestial bodies and recorded their periodic motions. And I took that from a website called Sci-ESA Intelligence, also called the Oldest Sky Maps. So if they were kings and they're standing there and they're, trying to look intelligent with their, look, I'm doing astronomy, me too, I totally see something. And they have their charts, and then they see a star that doesn't belong. And God tells them to follow that star. There's different writings, there's different things that let them know this is important. And they choose to follow that star. Why were there only 3 of them? Were there only 3 kings in ancient Asia who decided they wanted to look up at the sky and saw the star? But, why shepherds? We don't know why God chose to do these things. It's all very interesting and exciting. It's always exciting. It's not exciting when you don't understand what you're studying for an exam, but when you're studying God and he does stuff that he doesn't clarify why he did it or exactly how he did it. You just know that he did it. It's always very exciting. What we do know, as I said, is that they had to be wealthy to have had gifts to bring with them. And we know that they came from distant Asian lands. We don't know what their beliefs were, but we do know that they had been used by God. God chose to show them a star, and he chose to lead them to see Jesus. Why he chose them, we don't know. He used them to make it so Mary, Joseph, and our King Jesus would be able to flee to Egypt. He used them to bring gifts that showed those who had not seen the angels that men of great wealth and power honored